Did you know Jesus was not the first Messiah? Long before the story of Christ, ancient writings spoke of another chosen one. A man who was expected to rise, lead a war, and die so that redemption could begin. In old Jewish tradition, there were not one but two Messiahs. One, a glorious king who would rule forever. The other, a warrior who would suffer first. If Jesus was not the first, then who was he? And why has his story been almost completely erased from history? A secret buried for centuries waiting to be uncovered. The silent era is about to reveal the forgotten Messiah. What if the promise of a savior was never meant to be about one man but two? Ancient Jewish writings, the Talmud, the Zohar, and the Midrash speak of a forgotten prophecy. They describe two messiahs, each with a destiny the world could not ignore. The first is Messiah ben David, a king from the line of David. The ruler who would bring victory, peace, and final redemption. But alongside him stands another. Messiah ben Joseph, a warrior chosen to come first. Not to reign but to fight. Not to live but to die. One Messiah was born for glory. The other, for sacrifice. And the prophecy makes it clear, without the suffering of the first, the triumph of the second can never begin. But who was this shadow Messiah destined to fall so another could rise? What kind of Messiah is chosen not to live, but to die? The prophecy describes Messiah ben Joseph as a warrior. His destiny was not a throne, but a battlefield. He was called to lead Israel into the final war, the apocalyptic fight against Gog and Magog. But victory was never part of his story. From the very beginning, his fate was sealed. He would rise, fight with courage, and fall. Yet his death was not a failure. It was the sacrifice that cleared the way for redemption. Ancient writings say his blood would wash away guilt. His fall would shake heaven and earth so that another Messiah could stand. He was destined to fall so another could rise. And only through his suffering could the path be opened for Messiah ben David, the king of final glory. But if his sacrifice was so important, why has the world almost forgotten his name? What proof is left that this forgotten Messiah was always part of the plan? The ancient texts hold the clues. In the book of Zechariah 12 verse 10, the people mourned the one they pierced. Early rabbis saw this as the fall of Messiah ben Joseph. In Isaiah 53, we find the image of the suffering servant. Despised, rejected, pierced for the sins of others. A figure who suffers, not for himself, but for his people. Even the Dead Sea Scrolls whisper the same truth. They speak of not one, but two Messiahs, a priest and a king. Two roles, two destinies, and one of them marked for sacrifice. These weren't accidents. They were blueprints. Every verse, every scroll, every prophecy points to a shadow Messiah. A figure meant to suffer first so that redemption could follow. But if the evidence is written so clearly, why is his story almost lost to history? What happens when a prophecy becomes too dangerous to believe? For centuries, rabbis preserved the teaching of two Messiahs. But over time, the story of Messiah ben Joseph began to fade. Why? Because his mission to suffer and die looked far too similar to the Christian story of Jesus on the cross. And after the disastrous Bar Kokhba revolt, when thousands were killed and Rome crushed Jerusalem, the idea of a dying Messiah became even more dangerous. To speak of a savior who must fall in battle sounded like defeat. Worse, it risked giving strength to the growing Christian movement. So the rabbis made a choice. Some left his role vague. Others spoke of him only in whispers. Slowly, the image of Ben Joseph was pushed into the shadows. His name became a whisper, hidden in fear, hidden in silence. But what if he was never just a prophecy? What if this warrior Messiah had already lived and already died? What if the forgotten Messiah was not just a prophecy but a man of flesh and blood? Some believe he was Bar Kokhba, the rebel leader of the 2nd century. He rose against Rome with fire and courage. For a moment, hope returned to Israel. But the dream ended in blood. Bar Kokhba was killed, his followers scattered, and his name marked as defeat. Others point to Onias III, a high priest murdered in the 2nd century BCE. His death shook the temple system, leaving scars that never healed. Some see Joshua ben Nun, the warrior from the tribe of Ephraim. He led Israel into the promised land but never ruled as king. His story echoes the role of Ben-Joseph, a fighter who prepares the way, but does not sit on the throne. And then there are the nameless. The martyrs, the rebels, the voices cut short in history. Men who gave everything and vanished into silence. Were these men simply failures in the eyes of history? Or was failure itself always the plan? What happens when two destinies are merged into one man? Early Christians saw something in their teacher, Jesus of Nazareth, that others had overlooked. They took the role of Messiah Ben-Joseph, the suffering servant who must die, and the role of Messiah Ben-David, the glorious king who must reign, and they joined them together. In Jesus, they claimed, both prophecies were fulfilled. The first coming, in weakness and pain. The second coming, in power and glory. He was called the Lamb and the Lion, the Martyr and the King. This gave Christianity a powerful story, a single Messiah who carried all roles. But something was lost in the process. When both figures were blended into one, the shadow of Ben-Joseph slowly disappeared. And yet the question remains, was his erasure an accident of faith? Or was it the price of building a new religion? What if the story of the first Messiah was never fully destroyed, only hidden? In the apocryphal Gospels, the books left out of the Bible, shadows of a dying Redeemer still appear. In the secret writings of the Gnostics, we find figures who suffer, who bleed, who fall in silence so that others may rise. Some early sects remembered him. They spoke of a Messiah who was chosen to suffer first. But their voices were silenced. Mainstream Christianity called these beliefs heresy and buried them deep. And yet, the memory refused to die. Whispers of Ben-Joseph lived on in hidden texts and broken traditions. Even erased, his shadow never left the story. But if his presence never truly vanished, could he still be waiting for us to recognize him? What if history's greatest sacrifice was never meant to be remembered with glory but with silence? The prophecy of Messiah Ben-Joseph tells of a warrior who would rise, fight, and fall. His death was never failure. It was the key that unlocked redemption. He suffered so that another could bring peace. He fell so that the king could rise. And yet, his name is almost gone. Erased from teachings. Buried beneath politics and theology. Forgotten by time. But maybe that was always his fate. A Messiah who was never meant to rule. A Messiah whose role was only to suffer, then vanish into shadows. History remembers the kings. History crowns the victors. But hidden in the silence may lie the true beginning of redemption. And so we are left with the question. Was he just a prophecy? Or did a real man already carry this burden and die unknown, believing he had failed? Because sometimes the greatest story is not the one the world celebrates. It's the one it chooses to forget.